Nick Stumphauzer, Part 4.
So the other day, Nick Stumphauzer reached out to me by Facebook and he told me that he had successfully interviewed Aron Ra. I knew it was probably quite an ordeal, so I asked if I could give him a call and chat with him about how the interview went. So what you're about to hear is that short conversation. Enjoy. Hello.
Hey, David.
How'd it go?
I'm just existentially exhausted.
Well, what was his attitude like?
You know, he's got a good heart, you're right. But he's got to lay off the ad hominems. Like, all he can do is just tear into Christianity, and you've got to believe he's been burned at some point in time. He had a hard time answering the questions that I asked him, not because he was avoiding them, but he just goes off on these tangents and gets into really specific detail about stuff and doesn't quite answer the question beyond just saying, oh, that's not true, which isn't exactly a rebuttal. But he did have some really interesting responses a few different times, and whereas Sanford pulled me from all the way from evolution to almost intelligent design, you know, young Earth creationism, I feel like Aron pulled me more toward the center, and so now I'm just floating in this agnostic world, and I don't know what the fuck to think anymore.
It's the worst place to be. I don't like that. I mean, I don't like that blackness and the question marks. It's horrible. So what's your sense, like, in terms of, like, Aron Ra, like, he might be misguided, he might be hurt and wounded by religion, and it's Mormonism, which is not even Christianity, it's some weird, strange religion, but he's on fire for his faith, obviously. I mean, he's really passionate about what he believes, but his beliefs are bleak. Like, there's no free will, there's no afterlife. Basically, you can just do whatever you want here and now because that's all there is, you know? Does that enter into your equation when you want to crawl back on the fence and sit on the fence some more?
No, and here's why. Here's the crazy thing. So after my interview with Sanford and a few other things, I don't know if you know Michael Jones from Inspiring Philosophy, but I'm going to be doing an interview with him tomorrow. He's got a few things on proving the soul, the metaethics and the metaphysics of a soul, and that combined with my interview with Sanford gave me such peace. I was like, wow, there's a soul, all this life was created, everything. I felt like I finally had the Shire that I described in my podcast that I really desired. And then the other day I was driving and I was just sort of running through the implications of this in my head. And my ego has just been so abused, so beaten up so badly that it's so little part of the equation anymore that I'm able to do these sort of thought experiments. It's like, okay, so let's say Nick believes in God, and the Bible's true, and Jesus is Lord, and all these implications. What then? And I was astonished to realize that my nihilism was still there. Somehow the belief that there's a God didn't fix it for me, and I realized I was like, I'm still empty. And that still is kind of freaking me out a little bit. I'm chasing so hard, David. I am pursuing truth and God and certitude and faith and foundation harder than truly anyone that I've ever run across. And I feel like I'm moving backward.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I just want to mention that feeling of emptiness might not be a bad thing. I mean, that's what I'm striving for. I was never a nihilist, but I was a hard solipsist. But I want to have that emptiness. That emptying is a sort of necessary component. That dry, lonely emptying is a necessary component to be a true saint, a true mystic, and to allow space for God to enter in. And of course, you're gonna, if that happens, you're gonna have a real wild ecstasy. But that's not the point. I mean, I'm reading a lot the lives of the saints, and many of them that have mystical experiences talk about the indescribable joy and ecstasy of letting God in, making that space to let God in, and dying to self and letting God in. And then just the sheer torture when he withdraws again. And it's just like a hellish, nihilistic nightmare. But they have the faith, and they cling to that faith in the darkness, in the blackness. And then, God comes and visits once in a while, and you get that consolation. And it sounds like torture. It does sound like torture, but they always emphasize the same story, which is that, look, we've got limited time here on this pilgrimage that we're on. We fell from grace in the Garden of Eden. Now we're in this hellish fallen world. I'm a fallen sinner. And by the grace of God, I've got this faith. I'm going to cling to this faith. And when this short life is over, I will have wished that I had had more suffering, more desolation, more trials, more tribulation, more emptiness, more of that blackness and that nihilism. Because when I combine that blackness with my faith, my God-given faith, and I unite it to Jesus Christ and the sufferings of Jesus Christ. Even Jesus on the cross said, "Why hast thou abandoned me, God?" This is the height of mysticism, to unite yourself to that and to experience that blackness and that emptiness and that nihilism, that Christian nihilism. And every Christian mystic that I've read always says that this is the point of this pilgrimage here, is to unite your sufferings with the sufferings of Christ, so that you can save souls, so you can save your friends and your relatives and your enemies and your acquaintances and everyone, and those souls that are suffering in purgatory. This is a very, very, very short life. You may think it's long now, but wait till you get to purgatory. You're going to wish that you'd suffered more nobly and more worthily, and that you'd united your sufferings to God-given faith. So on the one hand, I envy you, or I'm jealous of this blackness that you're able to experience. But on the other hand, it's a pity that it's going to waste because you don't have the faith yet, which is necessary to give it such spiritual power.
Yeah, no, everything you said makes sense. And you're right. It's like I get all the downside with no upside. And
the worst of both worlds.
Yeah, and the use of faith also makes sense too. It's like if you did have that truly extraordinary connection with God, that ecstasis, then I think it would be reasonable and beautiful to endure the blackness, the void, clinging to that faith.
Yeah.
That makes sense to me, and I think that would be, I'm probably using the word wrong, but sanctifying.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, I don't have that. It's kind of just like I'm truly ready to give up the search and just sort of live.
First of all, Aron Ra is a good example of someone who has given up. So his daily quest for pleasure involves food, sex, the stuff that the lower beasts get up to. And you can join him there. You will be like Aron Ra. You will be enjoying your life. You'll be laughing and having a lot of fun, making fun of everybody that doesn't agree with you and living life to the fullest. You can do that. You can go that route. But that's not the way to go. I can tell you that's not the way to go. And if you listen to someone like Sanford, he's in touch with the faith. He may not be a saint, but he's in touch with the faith. He's got the faith, and he's willing to make self-sacrifice and to suffer. And you're clearly called to a higher calling than just mucking about in the sensual pleasures of an animalistic life. You are. You have to admit that.
Well, perhaps I was not clear by what I meant when I said giving up. I guess I would just say that I would focus on living instead of thinking. I'm sure that there would be some amount of hedonism that would creep in, but that wouldn't be the goal. I think the goal would just be to be in tune with my experience, as opposed to stuck in my brain trying to reason so hard,
Yeah.
That's some wisdom that comes from my grandpa. And actually, I'm hoping to have my grandpa on the show in the next episode or two here, because he has some really extraordinary bits of wisdom when it comes to empiricism. He's told me multiple times, empiricism is not the only way to find truth. And he doesn't say that as a religious man. He says that as a grandpa. And I've never really understood what is meant, so I want to have him on the show and kind of understand that from him. But he really advocates more for a holistic approach to just experiencing the wonders of life, as opposed to trying to intellectualize the shit out of it so you can be like, I've got it.
Yeah. I'm all in favor of letting go of the mental masturbation. That's for sure. Yeah. I'm all in favor of letting that go. I don't think that comes from God. That's, if anything, that's the tricks of the evil one, just luring you into a labyrinth, and there's no way out. There is no way out. There's no satisfaction there. So, I mean, I joke about my slapologetics. I've got this sloppy apologetics that I engage in. It's because I'm like a little child. I love God, and I sincerely believe that the Holy Roman Catholic Church is the true church founded by the God-man Jesus Christ. Do I lose sleep about the fact that I might be wrong? No, I don't, because I'm a little child. I know that if I had 100 lifetimes to study all of the intricate questions of theology and philosophy and scriptures and translation and the original languages and the culture and all the archaeology and everything, 100 lifetimes with a genius 200 IQ would not suffice to make my needle move one smidgen on that gradient. You know, it's not an intellectual pursuit. It's not. If you think it is, then you're wrong. It's a question of the will. Do you love God? Do you love your creator? Yes or no? If you do, it's win-win-win. I mean, which religion do you think is the one true religion? If you think it's Buddhism, go for it. If you think it's Hinduism, go for it. If you think it's Southern Baptist denomination, go for it. Whatever you think it is, just be sincere and authentic. That's why I'm happy. That's why I'm carefree. That's why I don't lose sleep. I sleep very well at night, even though I might be wrong. Do I think that I'm wrong? No, I don't. So, I mean, I think that once you take that initial leap of faith into God the Father, all the questions about which religion and what are the details and what do the holy books say and what does this sect say and what about these practices and those practices, all of that nonsense will become crystal clear to you because you love God and you're striving to follow God, and it's just natural. You will know for yourself what you're comfortable with, what you're not comfortable with, what is authentic, what's fake. Are you just submitting to some kind of weird peer pressure because your family's Catholic? Is that why you're Catholic? Or is it sincere and authentic? You know. But without that first step of taking a leap of faith into God, you're screwed because then it becomes an intellectual project again.
Yeah, and so all of what you said made perfect sense. My question is, I know you've listened to my episode on the wager. How do you decide, how do you make that first step without it being some form of self-deception?
Well, I mean, your path and mine are quite different. I came through hard solipsism and I was God, and it just sucked being God. So it just, as soon as I had Rene Descartes point me a sort of an easy leap of faith, like a short and quick little hop onto monotheism, I just took it. But you're not in that privileged position. You're in a quagmire of question marks and darkness and existential angst that's much more profound and horrifying than where I was, even though it was not fun being God, but at least I was God. At least I had eternal life. It was like, how did I fool myself so thoroughly? How did I make myself seem finite and contingent and stupid and stinky and ignorant? How did I do that? Wow, I must be a pretty clever God. But it's a better place to be. It really is a better place to be. But it's too late for you. You're already in nihilism, so you can't get there. You'd have to fake it. That's the problem, is that for the nihilist, you pretty much feel like you have to fake everything. But I never had to fake anything. I really thought I was God. And then when I realized I wasn't, it was just like, oh, good.
Praise God, I'm not God.
Yeah. So for you, I mean, I think your grandfather probably would have some good advice, like meet a woman, check out the sunset once in a while. But a lot of your problems just stem from the fact that you're young. I know you probably don't like to hear that, but a lot of it is just that growing up. My early 20s were a nightmare, a bloody nightmare. I was having anxiety attacks. I was questioning everything. I was paranoid. I was, experimenting with sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And I know you're much more moderate in all that stuff, but still, I mean, it's just the spiritual growth that you're going through is painful. And I can tell you, one thing I can tell you that'll make you feel good is that as you get older, you stabilize. And now, so I would encourage you to stabilize in a direction that is sane and stabilize in a worldview that at least has free will. And if you can't stabilize into a worldview that at least has free will, then you may end up going through a very prolonged adolescence like I did. Like I was a hard determinist and I was an atheist or whatever for all of 25 years of my adult life. I feel like I wasted a quarter of a century. I don't want you to. And I think you're a brighter person than I ever was. And so I think your investigations here are gonna bear fruit. So I'm not really worried about you. So I would encourage you to continue climbing the mountain of truth. And this is an image that you like to use. It's a little bit of an elitist image. I don't agree with you that you can't be brothers and sisters with those that you find at the top, because no one is sitting at the top without having struggled. Everyone at the top of that mountain has gone through a lot of struggles. It just might not be publicized on a podcast, but I can guarantee you that they're going through a dark night of their soul for different periods in their life. They will have gone through very trying experiences and ordeals, and they've been tested and they've been tempted. And if they've overcome, then there's merit in that, even though it's by the grace of God that they were able to overcome. But I would not judge those who look on the surface to have coasted into heaven. I would not judge them, because no one coasts into heaven.
Yeah, it's definitely my bitterness and my ego. It's and I think that's because, from my minute perspective, I see the religious that I'm surrounded by as mostly uninitiated people, and I guess it just frustrates me, and probably I'm also jealous. It's in some form as well, but I think it frustrates me when there's the expectation of belief on me, and I feel like saying, have you even examined what you believe? And typically the answer is no, and that's where I get that bitterness.
Yeah, well, it ain't over till the fat lady sings, right? There are two final destinations, heaven and hell. And those who make it to heaven will have examined themselves. You can rest assured about that. You're not going to find any lazy, stupid people in heaven, okay?
Yeah.
They will all have examined themselves. And so, you don't need to worry about that. And you don't need to keep track of other people's sins and laziness and all that sort of thing. You're not going to be held accountable for any of that. So that's another thing, to lighten your load a bit and just have that laser focus on yourself and on your own weaknesses, and growing in virtue. Speaking of virtues, you said recently that you started praying. Is that true? Have you continued with that? How's it been going?
I think it's still in that very infantile type of prayer where I just sort of shoot up some smoke every once in a while, where my ego has subsided enough where it's no longer offensive to me to reach out and ask God for X, Y, or Z.
Can you give an example?
Sure. You're not allowed to laugh, but the one that I have in my I'm gonna cry. The one that I have in my journal right now is that God make of me a king that David and Solomon would be jealous of. And this is something that I really have not told. I don't know if I've told anyone. I think I'm a king. I am saying this with the small part of myself that believes it. I think God is going to make of me a king. And so I just wrote it down and I said, do it. Give me your best. I feel that greatness within me. I do feel like I'm an extraordinary person, and I don't say that in the narcissistic way. I have a sense of greatness within me, and so my request to God is to just manifest that.
Well, I don't know if you know, but the Catholic Church teaches dogmatically that we are all, by virtue of our baptism, priest, prophet, and king. Did you know that?
I do remember learning that in theology, but I don't know that I have ever actually applied that. What does that mean?
The answer to every question is Jesus Christ. So Jesus Christ is the prophet, the priest, and the king, right? So we don't need to search too far to try to unravel this mystery. How can I be priest, prophet, and king? Well, by being Jesus Christ. I mean, this is the goal, the mystical goal of religion, is to unite ourselves with God, and in particular with the God-man, Jesus Christ, who is God made flesh, and we are made in his image and likeness. So we have to be prophet, priest, and king if we're going to go to heaven. It's pathetic to see how few of us live up to that. And so you're right to sneer and cajole the limp noodles that claim to be religious, because it is pathetic. I'm pathetic, you're pathetic, and those religious fanatics everywhere are pathetic. It's only the saints where we can see a glimpse of that heroism, that true heroic virtue. They love completely. They love without reservation, and they give their lives, and they've got this energy that comes from God. And they are clearly prophet, priest, and king, and you can see it in their lives. But the rest of us are just muddling along, and we're watching our favorite shows at night and eating our favorite snacks and getting fat. It's pathetic, but that's the way it is. So I hope you'll get inspired by the saints. We are not living, but they are living. They're an example. We have to look to them. We have to be inspired by them. And maybe, God willing, one day we'll take that little step and another step, and we will end up being like them. We'll be saints. We'll live courageously and virtuously, and we'll inspire others. And you can be that king that you want to be, but it's only through Jesus Christ that you will be king. So if you're serious about being a king, and I believe that you are, look to the saints. That's my advice. All
right. Well, I'll look into it. I appreciate it.
So don't despair. Don't give up hope. And did Aron have anything positive to say? In terms of you and your quest for God, or were you open about that, or no?
No, I think if I did open up about my religion, let alone my politics, it would be a very short conversation.
But he was nice to you. He ended the conversation cordially.
Oh yeah. We talked for a few minutes afterward, and he was very kind. But I think intellectual masturbation is sort of his drug of choice. He can't get enough of that, and I totally empathize with it for sure. But there's only so many times you can masturbate before you're just like, man, this sucks. I need a real relationship, and that's kind of where I'm at now.
Well said, my friend. Well said. Excellent. So I gotta get back to the wife here, but thanks for taking the time. I know you're exhausted, but thanks for talking to me, and I'm praying for you. I hope you'll pray for me. That's something maybe you could do, is pray for my mom, because she's suicidally depressed. She just wants to die. She's like really, really in a nasty place. So even if you don't believe there's God, even if you think that life is meaningless, do me a favor, pray for my mom. Who knows? Maybe your prayers work. Maybe they'll have an effect, and you'll find out at the final judgment if I'm right.
Well, I have not done this in a very long time, but as my friend, I'd be happy to get on my knees and shoot up some smoke for you.
Wow. This could be your road to Damascus, man.
Whatever it takes. I needed a friend tonight, and I'm sincerely grateful that you reached out.
I love you lots, Nick, and I'm thinking about you. I'm praying for you, and you've got some good friends that are backing you up. Whichever way you end up going, just stay strong, keep your head up, okay?
Much love, David. You have a great night.
You too, bye.
Bye.
If you want to learn more about Nick Stumphauzer and his podcast and his journey back to God, just go to nickstumphauzer.com. That's nickstumphauzer.com. And there's a link there to his podcast called The Prodigal. So that's it. Take care. We'll talk soon. God bless.
If you like your worldview, if you think it's swell, if you've got some questions, ask me and I'll tell. All you got to do is ask. All you got to do is